We seek the truth.
Would you be handing your resignation to the Minister of Culture tomorrow, sir?
No, I will not.
The leader of the opposition, you have accused your government, sir, of using the Grenada Development Bank to facilitate the financing of personal loans for certain government ministers.
The other side is in no position to talk about those issues, and I will leave it there.
We discover new perspectives.
You know his leadership style, and so many are saying, why are you coming now to talk about those issues?
Now is the time to speak. You have the right to decide who will take over.
And you met with Dr. Mitchell, and perhaps you might want to confirm what that meeting was about in your response. But
Dr. Mitchell, like myself, are Grenadians.
We ask the right questions.
Why was there no report on the work done of the commission? And how is this new committee different from the commission that was initially established back in 2022? So who are these elements that are using you?
I'm disappointed in my political leader.
And why is that animating those political conversations now?
It's a very interesting question.
The Bubb Report with Dr. Kellan Bubb. Thought-provoking, truthful, unbiased, and truly original reporting.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones.
That applies in the individualized as well.
We provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, a pleasant good morning and welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. And you're probably wondering why we are starting this week's program by featuring the great Muddy from St. David's. Of course, you've not heard. Of course, Muddy made the Rolling Stone magazine as having being featured as one top 100 global artist for 2025. Of course, this news that Muddy has made it to the Rolling Stone list of 100 best artists globally is in fact a big deal and a testament to the superb quality of locally made soca by way of expert productions from the sister isle of Carriacou. Now, to understand why Muddy's recognition is a big deal, we must first appreciate the significance of this magazine in the first place. Now, for almost 60 years, Rolling Stone magazine has dominated music journalism and hasn't shied away from naming the good and the bad in American and global music. Now, appearing on Rolling Stone's 100 Greatest Artists list means that an artist is recognized by his peers and by global critics for significant impact, originality, and lasting legacy in popular music. going beyond just sales to consider influence on culture, depth of catalog, and the ability to remake the world with their music. It signifies major cultural relevance and a place in the pantheon of influential musicians. Now, for decades, Rolling Stone's focus on the global South has been to feature reggae extensively through lists of greatest albums from the late great Bob Marley, Toots and the Maytals, Jimmy Cliff, of course, the late great as well, Sean Paul, Coffee, Peter Tosh, as well as Junior Murphy. Now, this is one of the first times in the magazine's history that soca, and in particular Grenadian soca, has been given the prominence of other global South pop musical expressions. Now, the appearances of Muddy and Marshall Montano, and of course Bunji Garlin before them, in Rolling Stone magazine is highly significant for soca music, as they represent major breakthroughs in global recognition and validation for a genre that has historically been marginalized on the international stage. Now, more importantly, it gives a global nod to the jab jab, which has developed as a signature Grenadian cultural expression. Rooted in the history of African genealogical pride and Black satirical resistance against the racist enslavers who subjugated our people for centuries. Of course, we do take this opportunity to congratulate Muddy on his wonderful accomplishment. This, folks, is a big deal. And of course, as I always say, St. David's talent is Grenada's success. As a son of St. David's, Muddy being also from St. David's, and of course, not forgetting Expert Productions, who produced this wonderful track, we say congratulations to all of them. Folks, this is the Bubb Report. We'll be back for the second segment of the program. Please stand by.
You want to know why I know this one this time? Ready? I say load me up in the oil. Everything got to spoil from that man gonna cook. Okay, been watching this for a while. Here we come in next time. Okay. I say load me up. Get this. I say load me up in the oil.
Your loved ones pass on.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, we would love to hear from you. Where are you joining us from this week? Where are you watching the program from? Of course, I know that we have our regular suspects. Of course, that is a term that George Grant used to refer to his audience back in the day with Sundays with George Grant. I suspect Margaret Francis is here. We have Shelley, of course, who is joining us from Grenada. I know that Shelley is home. Shelley and I actually attended the TMI Community College together. So I think Shelley, a TAMCC reunion is in order there. Of course, we have Lydia, who's joining us from Toronto, Canada. I suspect it is a cold and frigid winter morning, as it is here, a cold and frigid winter morning. We actually had some snow here in the DMV area over the last week. Thursday and Friday, we had some snow here. Then we have Jennifer Lawrence, who is here. And of course, we have Margaret, one of the usual suspects alumni, who is here. We have Deborah Brown joining us from Montreal. So folks, as you're coming into the room, please do us a favor by sharing today's program, like the program as well, so that others can have an opportunity to participate in this week's very important conversations, not only from the Rotary Club, but of course, on matters related to your pocketbook and the national budget of Grenada. So we really want to get into our first segment of the program, where we will continue our series of programming highlighting the wonderful work of the Rotary Club of Grenada. Now, of course, this week, of course, before we get into this week's program, we also have to make it clear, that the Rotary Club has been involved in working with and serving communities across Grenada for many years. Now, over its 43 years of existence, the club has undertaken sterling work in the community, demonstrating service above self as it lives out the mantra of Rotary International, which is improving the quality of life in the community. Now, this week, we will feature the work of the Rotary Club in sponsoring and organizing the Christmas at the Point at Quarantine Park on Grenada's south coast. Now, for many years, Rotary transforms the Quarantine Point Park, a park that it adopted. And of course, each year, they turn that park into a festive wonderland of lights, joy, and community, making it an all-out family and national affair. And of course, here to make sense and discuss this year's Christmas at the Point is Rotarian Valerie Andrew. So I will pull up Valerie now. Valerie, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you.
Good morning, Dr. Bubb. Thank you so much for having us today, and the same sentiments right back to you.
Yes, absolutely. So let us talk about first, let me introduce you, Valerie Andrew. You're Rotarian, but what specific role do you take on with the Rotary Club of Grenada?
Okay, so I've actually been in the Rotary family for the last 5 years. I started off in the Rotary Club of Grenada, which for those of you who may not know is the younger arm. And I'm currently in the Rotary Club of Grenada serving as the secretary for this year.
Okay, very well. So you are the secretary there. Of course, we think of secretaries as just a simple role, but it's not. You guys do the important work of record keeping and keeping the data so that 50 years later, somebody would say, well, let me go back and look at the minutes from 2025. It is your work that would cause that to happen. So talk to us about Christmas at the Point this year. Of course, Rotary, as we know, they have adopted Quarantine Point, and that has become such a wonderful space for recreation, especially for the kids. Every time I go to Grenada, I go there with my godson, and he really, really enjoys it. So talk to us about Christmas at the Point.
Sure, no problem. I'm happy to hear that about your godson also. So
Yes.
Christmas at the Point, this is our 3rd year. And of course, as you know, it is our family-friendly Festival of Lights for the holiday season. And we actually started this project off as Carols by Candlelight, which is what most persons would know. This was in 2009 we began. And as we grew, we began evolving the project so that we can have greater impact over a longer period of time. So this year it is running from November 30th, 2025 to January 4th, 2026. So we're really trying to involve as many local vendors, artists, so forth, so that we can create a bigger impact for the Christmas season.
Absolutely. And of course, many citizens actually visit that space for the holidays. You guys have really transformed it into something that, like in the past, it was the St. Paul's community that did a lot of that work, but you guys have really taken it to the next level. Let us talk about the highlights for this year's activity.
Sure. So we have a number of highlights. Of course, number one being our display of lights. And we really want to thank the Benoit family. Without them, it would not be possible. The Benoit family donates the lights, comes up with a concept for the lights. So we are very, very grateful to them for that. As well as our Santa's Grotto, where we cater to the kids. So storytelling, crafts, different nightly activities occur at the grotto. And of course, we will have Santa ever so often giving out gifts. So we want persons to bring their kids down to get gifts for the Christmas season. We also have our tuk-tuk tunnel rides, the little vehicle that drives through the tunnel of lights around the park, so you can see all of the different structures. We have our movie nights under the stars. We have movies every night, as well as nightly entertainment, which will change ever so often, live bands, DJs, cultural showcases. Last night we had a panist, so that was very exciting. We also have our food court and holiday market. So we have a wide array of not just local vendors, but we have Nigerian cuisine, Cuban cuisine. It spans a wide array of different foods. So a person should definitely come out to try. And we have our pop-up boutique shopping market. And this is where we have our local vendors selling a variety of local products from jewelry to drinks, whatever the case may be, the perfect place to get your last minute shopping gifts for the Christmas season. So yes, that's a few of our main attractions this year.
That sounds really, really exciting. I hope that Rotary Club of Grenada East can actually decentralize this, and perhaps we can have something like that in Grenville as well. So folks from, Grenville, St. Andrews, St. David, the best parish, St. David, I'm just kidding, can have another venue. But that sounds really amazing. Now let's talk about the dates and hours. Is it an all-day thing? Is it more in the evening? What can patrons expect in terms of those dates and the times that they can begin traversing Quarantine Point?
Sure, no problem. So of course, the main feature is the display of lights. So it's an evening activity. We begin at 5 p.m. and end at 12 midnight, Wednesdays to Saturdays every week. And that's inclusive of public holidays, of course, from November 30th, like I mentioned before, to January 4th.
What's the price of admission?
Right. So walk-ins are $5. Regular car load, which means you park a little further from the park in the Quarantine Point Park, but at the bottom side, that's $10. And then premium parking, which is closer parking to the park, is $20. We will have special pricing for New Year's Eve, but you have to stay tuned to our pages to see what that would be.
So for those who do not have a car, but for those who are taking the Grand Dance bus, Grand Dance, you remember that song? If you follow soca, is there a separate price of admission for those patrons who do not have vehicles?
Walk-in $5. Once you're on foot, you pay $5. Okay. Yes.
Now, finally, let us talk about the community impact of this activity. Of course, we know that it's just not a matter of just putting on a light show for the holidays, but what comes out of this for Rotary with respect to the overall work that you do in the community?
Yeah, so we like to think that we have somewhat of a trifecta of impact. At least that's our goal. So first and foremost, of course, the Wonderland of Lights and all the activities is meant to be a community service project where we allow persons within Grenada, young and old, to develop these core memories of experiencing a Christmas wonderland, which is not usually customary in the Caribbean. And the price point is pretty low for the number of activities and the lights and so forth that go into it. So that is a community service project within itself. We also promote economic development and promote our local vendors and artists by showcasing so many of them in our holiday boutique, as well as stage performances and the food vendors market. And lastly, of course, the funds raised from this project goes right back to the community so that we can fund our community service projects for the next year. And just to share a few of what we did last year, we had our annual health fair, which was held at the Guelph Medical Station. And we had, we've been working with the Grenada School for Special Education to extend their school, as well as have a Christmas party, which is coming up. And we actually started a Learn to Swim program for the students at that school. So we're using the funds to go right back to the community.
Absolutely. Is there anything else you wish to add before we get to the next segment?
I want to share that every night is not going to be the same. So we want persons to come out as many times as they can. Stay tuned to our social media pages. We have Rotary Club of Grenada events separated by hashtags on Facebook and Instagram, as well as Rotary Grenada 7030 on Facebook, so that you can see what activities are coming up next for the kids, which vendor highlights we have, which performances we'll have on which night, so that you can experience as much of what Grenada has to offer. And for those of you who don't have social media, you can also look us up at christmas.gd to get onto our website so you can see the schedule of activities as well. So come out as many times as you can, bring the entire family, bring your friends, bring everyone to the park to experience Christmas with us this year.
Absolutely. I will not be in Grenada, but I will certainly encourage folks to attend because it's something that I really enjoy. It engenders community really on so many levels. And of course, Grenada, there is a lack of public spaces in Grenada, and Quarantine Point is one of those spaces that I think where people can come and really enjoy, and it's sort of a watering hole for everything community. So congratulations to you and the Rotary Club for this wonderful space that you've really curated for the national community.
Thank you so much, and we hope to see you in Grenada next year at the Point for Christmas.
Yes, absolutely. That's for sure. Okay, viewers and listeners, of course, that was Rotarian Valerie Andrew joining us there to discuss Rotary that's Christmas at the Point down there at Quarantine Point. Of course, they do have an annual Christmas activity with lights and music and other forms of entertainment. That's really a family affair. And, the Rotary Club of Grenada is encouraging you to really go down there and experience the joy of the season, the joy of the season around this time of year. So, folks, what we want to do now is to immediately take our next break and come back for our next interview for this week. And that is, of course, with Grenada's Finance Minister, the Honorable Denis Cornwall. So please stand by for that conversation.
Now, when we say
much has already been said on this side of the House regarding the cost supplement. Let me simply add clarity on the 2025 Christmas Free Barrel Program. The effective date, goods available for clearance on or after December 8, 2025, and shipped before January 5th, 2026. Goods shipped before January 5th may arrive in late January and early February due to normal transit times. An additional 7 days may be required for the stuffing depending on port congestion. Tax relief. 100% waiver on duties and taxes including customs service charge. Importers pay only stamp duties of $5.50 per barrel. Grenada Port charge of $7 per barrel. Eligible containers: barrel, boxes, crate, small courier packages, DHL, GPC, Global, E-Zone, limited of 2 packages per household. Eligible items: food, clothing, small household appliances, linen, toiletries, sanitary products, and cleaning supplies. Madam Deputy Speaker, through these cost of living measures totaling EC 47 million, we are increasing the purchasing power of our citizens, especially the most vulnerable. Meanwhile, members on the opposite side said, members of the opposite side of this House continue to criticize, but offer not a single idea to help the ordinary Grenadians.
Mr. Speaker, there are modifiers in all these statistical analysis, and in this case, if you look at the numbers over the last 3 years, there has been a substantial drop, a reduction in the persons actively soliciting jobs. Over the last 3 years, from 2022 to 2025, 2,000 people have decided that they no longer have any hope. They will drop out of sight, disappear, and therefore, because of this shrinking hope, the statistics tell a particular story. In other words, unemployment is apparently low because less and less people are in the workforce. There's a figure called the participation rate in the workforce. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, when you stop counting the discouraged when you stop counting the defeated and the disillusioned, of course, your numbers improve. You could achieve zero unemployment tomorrow if enough people stopped trying to find jobs. So, Mr. Speaker, the numbers and the stats are there. The numbers actually indicate and should be alarming because what it indicates is that the low unemployment rate referred to by members on the other side is actually a rise in hopelessness among particularly our young people.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Now, for this segment of the program, and of course for the next segment as well, we will be turning to the 2026 estimates of revenue and expenditure by speaking with Grenada's Finance Minister, the Honorable Denis Cornwall. Now, for fiscal year 2026, the government presented a record-breaking $1.96 billion budget, doling out major provisions in health reform by way of Project Polaris, youth empowerment, the modernization of the country's physical infrastructure, climate resilience, as well as measures to ameliorate the pressures associated with cost of living and inflation. Now, the government says the budget is fully financed, though a whopping 309 million EC dollar deficit is still in play. Now, the administration says it will finance this deficit through government deposit and limited domestic and external financing, while also aiming to deepen the nation's transformative agenda under the theme towards Vision 75, powering progress through people's participation and innovation. Of course, the overall budget summary is as follows. Recurrent revenue, 1.3 billion EC dollars. Grants, that's 37.6 million EC dollars. Recurrent expenditure, 1.1 billion EC dollars. Strategic initiatives, $206.7 million. The capital side of the budget is expected to be financed at $370.4 million. The current account surplus currently is at $229.8 million EC dollars. Principal repayments, $313.2 million. And of course, the primary deficit after grants stands at $229.2 million EC dollars. As I said earlier, the overall deficit after grants stands at $309.8 million EC dollars. At this time, I'm happy to be joined by Grenada's Minister of Finance, the Honorable Denis Cornwall. Honorable Minister, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Kellan Bob, for the invitation, and I'm happy to be here with you today to basically set the record straight and provide additional clarity on the 2026 budget.
Yes, if you can just adjust your camera so we see your full frame. There you are very well. First and foremost, Mr. Cornwall, how are you doing? How is the Christmas shaping up? How are you doing in your constituency? Of course, we know that St. Patrick was also hit by Hurricane Beryl, so I suspect that has been keeping you busy as well.
Yes, I must say that currently I'm under the flu, so you may hear me doing a little toss here and there, but I'm fine. St. Patrick East is doing pretty well, I think, based on all that we have done over the last 3.5 years. And so I said in my closing address, St. Patrick East is doing well.
It's doing well, and you're doing well as well.
Yes.
So I suspect you can take some homemade bush tea for that cold.
I currently have my little mixture here.
Very well. That's good to know. Very well, sir. Okay, Minister Cornwall, let us get into it, sir. Now, of course, in the budget, I had an opportunity to read not only the speech, but the estimates. And the first issue that I want to raise, sir, is financing the deficit. And of course, in the presentation and in the estimates, there are commitments to look at financing the deficit by way of grants. Now, what specific grants have you identified that will close the deficit gap? And why not close that deficit gap by raising revenue?
Okay, so let me begin by saying that if you look at the summary figures of the 2026 budget, we talked about a recurrent revenue of $1.3 billion.
Yes.
We talked about a recurrent expenditure of $1.1 billion. This indicates that there is a recurrent surplus on the current account, basically. So it means that we are receiving more revenues than we are paying out in expenditure, and therefore this is critical for understanding what this budget is about. Now, when we take into consideration the grants, as well as take into consideration the capital expenditure, as well as the initiatives that we mentioned in the budget, yes, it would surpass our current revenue. Notwithstanding that, we told you that we are going to use our deposit held with several banks in Grenada, as well as we are going to do a limited amount of borrowing on the capital market as well as externally to bridge the gap of the expected financing that we need to satisfy the entire budget. And so once the current account budget is in a surplus, we need not to worry too much about that because we're able to pay our salaries and other supplies without a difficulty. Notwithstanding, to implement our capital budget and also the initiatives, we will need additional resources which we're going to borrow, as well as use our deposit that is held with the banks to take care of that. Now, let me just explain one thing. There are some people out there who think that borrowing is a crime. Borrowing is not a crime. And using our deposits to basically finance our budget is not also a crime. Because tell me if it makes sense to have millions of dollars sitting on your accounts and you're not getting much interest on it or interest at all. Do you want to leave those monies there and still go and borrow large sums of monies to finance your budget? The answer is no. We ought to take cognizance of the fact that we utilize some of the resources that we have lying on bank accounts and so on to take care of those matters. And so I'm confident that we have been able to satisfy all the requirements of our budget.
But Minister Cornwall, the counter argument that has been advanced by the opposition, at least, and I suspect by our panel who might be coming up later, is that the question of borrowing and the contradiction there. You're saying that, of course, this is a fully financed budget, of course, and of course, when we say finance here, that can also include borrowing as well. But what does it say about, of course, you just mentioned the fact that the revenue was raised. Why not use that revenue that was raised to finance the budget instead of having to go into that safety net to do so? I believe that borrowing comes from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, Grenada's fund at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank.
Well, the answer is not totally correct. But let me say that we said we're going to raise $1.3 billion in recurrent revenue, and our recurrent expenditure is $1.1 billion. It shows that we have just over $200 million in surplus on the current account.
Yes.
And so the recurrent budget, meaning payments for salaries and other supplies and so on, they are fully financed from the budget. However, the capital budget as well as the initiatives, we need to find resources to take care of those. And I said that we are going to utilize some of the money that we have on bank accounts to be able to do that, as well as we're going to use external borrowing, whether it is regional or external, to bridge the gap that is still needed to be financed. Now, there is nothing wrong about that. And I wish to add that in the last 3.5 years, Grenada government has borrowed from the international market, the regional market, on very concessionary terms and so on, meaning that the interest rate on our borrowings is as low as 1.25% to about 1.75%. We have grace periods in some cases of 5 years and term of 20, 25 years. And so these are very concessional rates that we are borrowing at. We are not borrowing in the market at commercial rates at all. And so this is why I'm thinking that we are able to do that. Going back on our grants, I mean, despite we have made a statement that we are going to be utilizing $37 million in grants for this year's budget, this does not indicate that our grant elements is dropping. In fact, we have much more grants received from our donor agencies and other friends and other institutions that we are also going to utilize as time goes by. However, we cannot put all the grants that we have expected to receive in 1 year's budget because In 1 year, we cannot spend all the grants that we are required to basically receive.
Okay, so not all of them at the same time. Now, Minister, of course, inflation and cost of living pressures are significant. And of course, that might be exacerbated by sort of the geopolitics that we see in the Caribbean. Of course, you know, it's crazy to me that over the last 5 years, everything surrounded the Russia-Ukraine war. But in this period, everything might surround the Venezuela-American war, at least the American war of aggression against Venezuela. That would be my framing of it. The point is, we have these geopolitical pressures that are in our backyard. Maurice Bishop said in nobody's backyard. Well, sadly, that's not the case, Bishop. Maurice, wherever you are, the Americans are in our backyard. And of course, the impact of this really comes in the form of inflation and cost of living pressures. Now, of course, in the budget, you articulated some inflation and cost of living measures. And of course, you know, and you referenced it, that was referenced in the clip there, around the whole issue of the Free Barrel Initiative, VAT-free measures for specific items on the food index there. But Minister, the whole question of Grenlec, and some are saying that those measures, while are laudable, they do not go far enough in ameliorating the cost of living pressures, specific to electricity bills. And of course, since August and since September, really, citizens have been seeing skyrocketing electricity bills owing to the adjustment in the fuel adjustment clause. Now, let us talk about perhaps why that specific Grenlec issue was not raised in the budget, because consumers are crying out.
Dr. Bob, there are things that the government has control over, and there are things that the government does not have control over. Take, for example, someone who has a house and has electricity connection. They can control their bill at the end of the day by making sure that they use measures that are contra the whole cost of the electricity. Take, for example, I live in a house by myself with my son. He washes every single day of the week. That does not help the cost of my electricity bill at all. What it means is that every day he washes and so on, it brings up the electricity bill. So parents or homeowners ought to know that if you use your electricity every day of the week, or you basically use it without thinking that there is a tomorrow, your bills will actually go high. The government of Grenada has taken several measures to make sure that the electricity bill that Grenlex produces for us is contained within some measures that we have taken. Take, for example, person burning electricity up to 99 kilowatts and so on, they get a $10 credit to their bill. People who runs over 100 kilowatts, let's say 150 kilowatts and so on, they get a 50% discount on the VAT. There are other measures that we have taken in the budget to make sure that we can help the cost of living down. Take, for example, the free barrel that we talked about in recent times would help persons and so on with their purchasing power. We have also showed them that on the fuel side of things that we have no control over because we do not actually produce oil and gas in Grenada at this point in time, that we have restricted the cost of the 20-pound cylinder to only $40. That has been so for the longest while. And again, we encourage persons to take care of their usage based on the environment. If you don't care about your lights on in the night, or you don't care about your fridge being opening every single minute of the day, then you will pay those costs. There's nothing wrong about that. It's based on your usage. And so we encourage people to take care of their affairs at home. This will basically turn around and give you a better result. On the side of the CPI, which is Consumer Price Index.
Yes.
Worldwide, we're talking about 2% in CPI. In Grenada at the moment, we are less than 1%. We produced documents to show that the CPI in Grenada was about 0.6%. There are those outside there who basically say that that figure is not correct. We asked them, well, give us a different angle of it, where they get their information from. So it's one thing to criticize the government based on what we produce, but you have nothing to say about where your data is coming from, to produce the idea of that cost of living in Grenada is extremely high and the government is doing nothing about it and so on. So I say to those people, give us the evidence to show that cost of living is very high in Grenada, and what do you propose that we do as a government to bring it down? If you cannot do that, I will say, well, look, there is no merit in your statements. Although I believe that everyone is entitled to their opinion, but I believe in the numbers that we have been producing because it was not an NDC statistics that we're using. We're using the statistics department to provide us with the data, which present government and previous government have used at their leisure. Now, there's one thing to say when it's convenient to you that the data we provide and the IMF provide is not working for them because it's not in their corner. But I'm saying that what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. So if you're believing that the data we're providing is not consistent, then go back to your days of those numbers and see where you got it from.
So the government is the adjustment of the fuel clause something that the government discussed, and you're saying that the government has no control over it, but Grenlec is a state entity now. The previous administration repurchased the organization.
You see, what some people want us to believe is that
yes,
the 25% non-fuel cost that was removed from Grenlec in the past, I can tell you that measure actually ruined Grenlec's financial situation. In fact, over the last 2 years, we have been trying to basically put back Grenlec on a good footing. It's one thing to say, for example, that investors invest in Grenlec and we're not being able to get any benefits from it and so on. And that is right to some people and so on. Give it to the people. The question remains, for how long? Because Grenlec would have gone bust if we continue with that 25% discount on the non-fuel cost.
Okay. Well, that is something we will certainly be following on. Now, Minister, one of the things that in the budget, of course, with respect to the capital projects, of course, infrastructure was there. Project Polaris, we saw major investments for youth development, but some have posited that the agricultural sector was not given a lot of love in this year's budget. And of course, the analysis of the latest available data in agriculture and fishing, Minister, showed notable declines in several key agricultural metrics. Of course, there was a 22.7%, and of course, I'm quoting here from the FROC report from 2024. They noticed a 22.7% decline in the value, for example, of banana production, as well as cocoa production, a decrease there by 13.7%. Now, let us talk about agriculture in this year's budget. How is the government intending in this year's budget to treat with the agricultural sector, which I suspect a lot of, especially in the northern parish of St. Patrick, burial might have been a factor there, but outside of burial, what other measures are there, capital measures to buttress the sector?
Let me first begin by saying that the configuration of the budget under economic development, agriculture, forestry, marine affairs, this year we have basically sought to move the marine affairs as a separate vote in this budget. So again, you may think that the numbers that we have provided in previous years seem to be less than it was. But let me say, for example, that we have to be mindful of that. In July of 2024, we were bombarded by Hurricane Beryl. Agriculture in the northern part of Grenada was affected greatly. In St. Patrick, for example, we know that we lost our nutmegs, we lost our bananas, cocoa, etc. In Carrick, we lost most of our animals and so on through the hurricane. We have in 2024, it's a lot of part, we provided to the tune of $37 million to farmers and fisher folks in Carriacou and St. Patrick. This money is what basically incentivize our farmers and fisher folks to get back to the trade. Now, if that is not sufficient, I don't know what is, because we always hear this story about we receive $118 million from the FROC as our payout from the from the insurance company with regard to our losses. Now, if I just give you a few figures and you do the math yourself, you realize that that $118 million would have been spent in no time at all. We placed $25 million in the Grenada Development Bank to basically aid and assist business people in Carriacou and other areas at 1% interest to help resuscitate those businesses and so on. As I said earlier, around $37 million went to farmers. 15 million plus would have gone to the housing sector in St. Patrick, and Carriacou another 15 million thereabout. So when you add up those figures, it tells you right away that the 118 million would have been gone because we had to provide things like food, transportation, and other materials to Carriacou to allow them to be able to regain the footing on what has happened since burial. So again, I do not have all the details before me, but I can tell you that the 118 million that was talked about was well spent in housing sector, in agriculture, in fisheries, and other areas that will help the country resuscitate.
Mm-hmm. Now, Minister, yes, you referenced the spending from Beryl, and I'm glad you brought up Hurricane Beryl spending. And again, quoting the midterm debt bulletin here with respect to, not the debt bulletin, but the midterm fiscal strategy report. Now, it tells us that only 74.7 million EC dollars was spent on Hurricane Beryl recovery. Of course, last year, the government appropriated over $269 million, Minister, for relief and recovery from Hurricane Beryl. Now, can you reconcile the difference in what was already spent and the balance that was appropriated from that $269 million?
Well, I would say to you that the monies that was spent was all spent for the good purpose, which basically help the population recover and to get back on their feet. Now, while I may not be able to tell you off my head at this point in time exactly how much money went here or there, I can say to you that the monies were utilized for the resuscitation of the Grenadian public. Take, for example, we have something that we have not mentioned to you before. Okay. There is a $61.1 million at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank that we have basically put there just in case we have another hurricane, whether it's Hurricane Keith or Hurricane Beryl or whatever the case may be. We have some.
Interesting you say Hurricane Keith, but I digress here.
But these monies were there to basically protect the country in the event of another hurricane or another devastation. And so 61 million plus all that you have mentioned would have far surpassed that $118 million. And again, the country did not stand still. We are still repairing roads. We are laying pipes to better the water service in Grenada. We are basically helping the farmers with plants and other materials. We have brought animals to the country, purebred animals, to basically help the meat production in the country in the future, and lots more. There are so many things that we have done in agriculture that it takes me there to basically explain all of these and so on. I don't want to go there. I think the Minister of Agriculture would have done a great job in trying to explain all that has been done in agriculture to basically relieve the pains of the persons in that sector in the country.
Now, let us talk about the nation's debt to GDP ratio. What efforts are being made to ensure, and of course, we again have to reference Hurricane Beryl here. And of course, one of the issues that Mr. David, Peter David, raised in this year's budget was the suspension of the fiscal rule clauses. How do you react to his concern that the delay on that suspension continues?
Okay, so let me say that the suspension of the clause was not a willy-nilly decision of the government of Grenada only. We took the advice of the IMF and World Bank and when we were doing that suspension of the clause to ensure that Grenada had sufficient fiscal space to spend on activities that would basically resuscitate the country in the shortest possible time. So when I hear this story about, we suspend the fiscal resilience clause and we are not paying our debt, for those who say that outside it, I say this is ridiculous. You know why? Because we have now lowered the debt to GDP ratio, even if we had a Beryl hurricane out there. In other words, we have been a very responsible government. We continue to meet our people's need and we have continued to pay our obligation as they fall due. Notwithstanding that, our expenses have increased based on the impact of Hurricane Beryl, and without having to basically deal with the impact of Hurricane Beryl, we would not have been borrowing large sums of money. To date, I can say we have been out in the market borrowing at concessionary rates, and our debt to GDP ratio has lowered still. In other words, we have been paying our debt, we are meeting our obligations, and we are a very responsible government where our debt is concerned. We have a target of meeting our debt to GDP ratio of 60% by 2035, and today we are not too far from that figure. We know that borrowing for the Beryl issue will cause our debt to go up temporarily and so on, but certainly we are on the ball and we are looking forward to lowering the debt to 60% as agreed to in our policies.
Minister, is there anything in this budget, and of course this is just a follow-up question here, is there anything in this budget that reflected, of course we know that budget consultations are held annually with respect to in advance of the budget. Is there anything from those budget consultations that are included in this year's budget?
Yes, and I would say that in a positive way because we have over the years gone out to the parishes, town hall meetings throughout. We have met with the sectors of Grenada to make sure that we get their views on what they want. Now, coming out of these consultations, you would get a wish list of a number of things that are doable or not doable. Some of them cannot be done in 1 year, and so I don't expect you to believe that we can pack in a 1 year's budget everything that we would have gathered over there. But we know where the pain lies. We know currently our roads are in a situation where it should not be because of all the pipeline that's going on. And some people take it for granted that, you know, to achieve certain progress and so on, you have to do magic. In other words, operate in the sky. We cannot do that. The roads that we are now digging up to lay our pipes and so on, they would be bad temporarily and so on. And so we expect at the end of the laying of the pipes, Grenada can lay the foundation for proper roads throughout the country. I've seen it myself. I drive over the country every single day of my life. And I believe that we have done a lot so far to improve our water in Grenada, to improve our roads. And so without some pain, you would not get any progress done. And so I'm happy to say that we are proud of being able to at least deal with the matters at hand and not run away from it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Minister, of course, the two final questions, and then we'll get to the panel segment of the week. The former Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Mitchell, anecdotally, I suspect anecdotally, because again, I love data and I love to live in data, and he is a statistician, I suspect also loves to live in data. But he, in his budget presentation, he made the point that things are happening, Minister, for those who are aligned to the current administration, that things are happening for the beneficiaries of CBI program. And of course, he pointed you out, of course, in as part of that. But the point is, he's saying that while things might be happening for the haves, he sort of posited a have-not situation. In other words, the way that monies trickle down to the working people of Grenada under his tenure in government is not the same way monies are trickling down. And of course, he referenced things like the debushing program, which caused working people to at least have some spending power. And so they would reinvest that money into the economy, into the small shops, into small businesses, and so on. Can you articulate why you think his observation of the national economy in Grenada is incorrect?
Dr. Bubb, I do have this opinion that everybody is entitled to an opinion, and so if it's that what he thinks, let it be so. However, this government has done quite a bit to make sure that the poor and vulnerable, as they like to refer to, is taken care of. Let me give you an example. In the constituency of St. Patrick East, there are a number of homes that I have rebuilt for persons, whether they're on the green side or on the yellow side or on the other side. And I can point out those homes if I wish to, but I would not go there. Reason being, when you hear people talking about, oh, this government is only for one set of people, that is absolute nonsense. Because my foot soldiers, when I go to the communities and so on, do accuse me of building houses for people who are not NDC supporters. And I'm saying that I am part of a government that provides for everyone, whether you're green, yellow, blue, or brown. And we have to do that because the funding that we are using to do so is not an NDC funding. As the government of Grenada consolidated the fund that we're using, that is catering for every man, woman, and child in this country. And so I refute that. Now, when you go back to things like, for example, debushing, we have not changed debushing. We changed the name to best, because we believe that we have to do much more than just putting out gangs outside it to cut grass on the roadside and leave it on the roadside for it to grow again and so on. We have done much more to that. We have advanced what we met in place and so on. So the number of programs that were geared towards helping the poor and vulnerable, that's still in place. We have not removed them. I can itemize them if you want me, but I think that would take a lot of unnecessary time to basically talk about the debushing and the debushing and the debushing. Debushing is still alive and kicking.
Okay, absolutely. Now, Minister, finally, before we get to the next segment, last week I had Ms. Laurel Bain on the program, who is, of course, the chairperson of the Fiscal Resilience Oversight Committee. And I do want to reference some of the recommendations coming out of the report that was tabled. Of course, that was the 2024 annual report that was tabled, of course, in April of 2025. She indicated that we should be getting the 2025 report, of course, because the fiscal year is coming to a conclusion. But one of the concerns, at least that stood out to me, was one, the monitoring of statutory bodies. Of course, in that report, it would appear that statutory bodies under the government's care, they are not submitting their fiscal reports on time. And in the report, the FROC says they should consider the establishment of a framework that would facilitate the imposition of penalties on statutory bodies and state-owned enterprises for failure to submit the audited accounts to the Minister for onward submission to Parliament as required by the legislation. That is one. Two, data collection. Data collection, that stood out to me. Because apparently reports are not submitted on time. Whether it's fiscal summary report or quarterly debt bulletin or other fiscal reports from government. So there are two questions here on the question of statutory bodies and making sure that they submit their financial reports on time. Is that something you are concerned about? And what will be the ministry be doing to act on that recommendation? And the second part of that question has to do with data collection in general from your ministry. What is happening there? Is it a lack of capacity? Is it a case that even though there is a capacity, that folks are just not doing their jobs? What is happening there?
Okay, Dr. Bob, let me begin by saying the chairman of the FROC right now, my colleague and friend from my days at Central Bank, is somebody I know very well. She worked also in the Ministry of Finance in my years of working with the Ministry of Finance. I do respect her very well, and we do have a very good open communication where whenever her report is provided, we do have exchange of ideas, we do have comments, we do have contribution on where they think there is room for improvement, and I do appreciate that. Notwithstanding that, let me go back to the idea that when we formed this government in June of 2026, we met a situation where statutory bodies and state-owned enterprises were not meeting their obligation by providing the financial statements on a timely basis. That continues still, despite our efforts to make sure we can improve the working condition of statutory bodies and state-owned enterprises. Take, for example, we have trained in excess of 187 directors of those entities to become accredited directors in less than a year and a half. Before that, there were none with that kind of designation. And so I must say the government has done quite well in doing so. Even from central government standpoint, we have situations where the last audited financial statement for central government was 2019. In other words, we still have 2021, 2022, when we came into office, and 2022 to 25, to still be audited and presented to the Parliament. The situation in the statutory bodies is even worse, because in some cases we don't get information from them. Yet from time to time, we get requests for them to pay bonus and to basically improve staff conditions and so on. We are saying that we have to start holding those entities to task. In other words, you can't present to me a proposal for paying bonus to your staff when you have not submitted financial statements for 2-3 years. That doesn't make sense to me. In other words, we're not sure when you do provide at the end of the day if that information is going to be useful for us and so on. So we encourage the statutory bodies and state-owned enterprise to make sure that their work is done. They have monies to pay for the auditing of their accounts, and so we expect them to basically produce those and deliver them to the Ministry of Finance so you can basically provide them to the Parliament. That's the only way I can think about it.
Have you had conversations with the statutory bodies on this? I mean, I'm just at a loss to understand how statutory bodies like the National Lotteries Authorities, the Grenada Postal Corporation, and others are not submitting fiscal reports. So what is spending like? Who is doing the auditing there? I mean, these are the people's money.
Well, yes, they're supposed to be providing audited financial statement. They have resources that they can engage an auditor to do it on a timely basis. But if they don't, what do? We have to find a way of basically penalizing them to make sure that they deliver. I have an entire department called the Policy Department in the Ministry of Finance, working with and talking to the statutory bodies almost on a daily basis and so on. But the results have not been where we think it should be at this stage. And so we have announced that we are going to take steps to make sure we improve the situation within those statutory bodies. Because you can't tell me that 65% of the economy is based in statutory bodies and so on. They employ the most persons, as far as I'm concerned. And yet you do not have a handle on what they do on a day-to-day basis. And so we need to bring that to some level of comfort.
What about data collection? That is something that also stood out for me in the FROC report. I suspect, the international, the Bretton Woods institutions, for example, or any other grant or donor funding organization would require the data from central government to make decisions with respect to donor funding, with respect to grant funding, with respect to loan financing and things like that. What's happening there? Well,
Dr. Bubb, I believe that the situation with the statistics needs improvement. We have no doubt about that. We have not shied away by saying that it is perfect, because as you said, from the Bretton Woods institution who visit us every year, there are times that we have limitations in terms of the data that is provided. Take, for example, we have now new sectors created, like the creative sector, the marine sector. We have not in the past been able to basically collect data on that. Even from the fishermen that goes to sea and come back with a catch, sometimes we have difficulty in capturing the data. It could be a capacity system within those entities, or it could be a case where people do not see data as an efficient thing that can use to basically improve our statistics and so on. So yes, I would not deny that there is gaps, there are issues that we need to correct within our statistics department. But over the years, the numbers that we have been using are consistent. I mean, they are not far from what we got 10 years ago or 15 years ago. They are basically the same methodology used in deriving this data. But I'm saying from a statistics standpoint, they need to improve on the new ideas and new policies that we have put in place to make sure we capture all the data. So the statement made by the FROC team of data is one of the things that we need to improve on. It's quite true.
Minister, finally, is there anything else you wish to add before we go to the next segment?
Well, I would say thank you for having me here, and I do hope I've been able to provide some response to the questions that you've asked, maybe in my own way, because there are so many things that have been said, and I didn't even want to go to it. Take, for example, one that you raised earlier on.
Yes.
One relating to basically that members of parliament are involved in the CBI programs and so on. I would say to you, in my case, when I came back to Grenada in 2016, I used my talent. I created a company. and I applied to the then government for a local agent license, which they gave me. I operated my company for about six months, and then I got a job which precluded me from being able to operate a company. So since then, I have not been operating that company in the way that they are saying outside. There are people outside who think I'm making $30 million a year. You know, if I had the opportunity to make $30 million a year, maybe I would not even be near to politics. So I want those people to shut them out and stop talking nonsense, because I'm not operating my company at the moment, and I am not making $30 million as they're asking outside. Other ministers whose name I've been calling left, right, and center, they have basically disassociated themselves with the company. And so they should also know that the Prime Minister is not involved in running his company either. So too is Andrea Senbonner, who is not running a company because she's an advisor to the government. And so these people out there need to stop that nonsense. It's not making sense by trying to fool the people outside and tell them Cornwall is a multi-billionaire at this point in time. And I am not, I repeat, I am not making monies from CBI as they're talking.
Is there anything else that you wish to debunk? Of course, there was another one that came up in the budget debate, and that, of course, you referenced CBI here. That has to do with the CBI windfall revenues that we saw over the last 2 years. The opposition's theory of the case here is that where has all that CBI money gone? Of course, we have to contextualize this as well by saying that we do have a National Transformation Fund. A lot of those CBI revenues are in there. That did not come up in those conversations in the budget debate, of course, but that is a concern that there is with respect to you saying that you have a deficit budget, but at the same token, you have these CBI windfall revenues.
You see, those people who are making those statements seem to be living in La La Land or Dreamland, because the CBI program was basically started under the former administration back in 2015 there, but I think. It's true they may have produced less results than the current NDC government and so on. But to imply that members of the government are selling passport, that's the operative word, selling passport. I don't think the idea is about selling passport, because if we were just selling passport, we would have nothing to show for it. They claim that they are the ones responsible for bringing in the Six Senses Hotel and the Intercontinental and the Silver Sands and other projects in Grenada. I do not doubt that. They initiated it and so on, and so all credit to them. But when we basically inherited it and we improved on it and we were able to basically take the windfall that we got from the influx of Russian applicants back in the last 2 years, and we did that, it's wrong. I'm saying today we are at a stage where the CBI program has normalized, because we no longer have the Russian influx into our country, because again, the countries in the north of us has ensured that we basically not able to process Russian applicants anymore. So we are back to our normal way of doing our business. And so we still continue to show that we have been able to raise sufficient revenue from the CBI program to basically help boost our non-tax revenue and so on, which is helping Grenada. What they fail to tell you also is that we have established a rainy day fund at the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, where we put at least 10% of that funding into a fund to basically deal with natural disasters and other shocks that we may encounter down the road. They didn't tell you that. As we speak, I know there is about $61.1 million in that fund today, which we have not touched. And so they ought to tell a full story. Ministers of government are not selling passport. We are looking for investment. Take, for example, in St. Patrick East, we have a big hotel going up, a 500-room bedroom hotel of $2 billion worth of investment, which includes the 500 rooms as well as an 18-hole golf course. They don't tell you that part of it, and so on. All they tell you is that we are selling passports, which is
well, Minister, that 200-room hotel, that was not instituted under this current administration. That was a previous administration's initiation. They're the ones who.
The agreement was signed with the Heng Sheng Group back in the 2021-22 period, and so on. We came into power. We adopted the project. We have been there with them at the sword turning ceremony, and we have been there every 3 months to make sure that progress is being made under this project. So I have no doubt that we have actually executed the project by giving the company support to do so. But we are quite aware that that particular project is one of the approved projects that we met in place when we came into office.
Any other capital projects that you want to highlight? Of course, that's another claim that the opposition.
I want to clarify another thing.
Yes.
There is a statement that was made by the opposition in the rebuttal to the budget that we tried to mama-guide people by breaking up the capital budget and initiative into different categories. Now, we have explained in the budget from the very inception on page 1 that the category initiatives is placed there to distinguish from the actual capital project. We know the capital project has a beginning and has an end. So take, for example, the building of a school. There's a start date and there's an end date. But take, for example, the same talked about the bushing. That does not have a start and end date. It continues every year, every budget. So these type of activities are classified as initiative and not capital project because it's not categorically right to treat the bushing as a capital project. The same thing happens with, for example, things that are ongoing on a daily basis, like the repatching of the road, the paving of the road that has happened from timing when we rolled to now. This is not a capital project. So it's one thing to basically classify properly what is a capital project, as well as to distinguish the difference between a capital project and an ongoing activity that takes place every year, every budget. And so it was clarified, made very clear in the very first page of the budget that this is what we're doing. So this idea about we are trying to hide expenditure and so on is absolute nonsense.
Okay. Minister, any final comments from you, sir, before we get to the next segment?
Well, I know that we are into a 3.5-year timing in the first term of the NDC. I'm also looking forward to a very successful term next election. And so we are working arduously to make sure that this happens. And whether you jump or you jump low, things are happening in Grenada for the NDC and the people of Grenada. This budget was one that was made by the people because of the consultations, and it's for the people because they are the ones who are going to benefit. Whether you are called the poor and vulnerable, the middle class, or the upper class, I don't know. Everyone will benefit in one way or the other from this budget. Thank you.
Minister, you seem very confident that your party will be returned to office in the next election.
Certainly.
Would you be contesting the St. Patrick East seat?
Certainly.
Constituency?
Certainly.
Okay.
Once my party has given me the green light to go, then that's it.
All right, Minister Cornwall, thank you so much for appearing on the Bubb Report this week, and a Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, and I wish you a speedy recovery with that cold. Yes. Absolutely, viewers and listeners, that was Grenadian Finance Minister Denis Cornwall, who really put on a full-throated defense of the 2026 estimates of revenue and expenditure. And we will be putting this budget 2026 under the microscope further with our panel segment, our esteemed panel. These gentlemen are no stranger to the Bubb Report, so we want to bring them in after we take this break. So please stand by for
are in deficit for the particular financial year. That we are saying we are spending more than we collect. That applies in the individual lives as well. If you spend more than you collect, you're in deficit. So let's use this national budget as an example. Why are we spending more than we are collecting? We are spending more because of a shock. What's that shock? The shock is Hurricane Beryl. Prior to Hurricane Beryl, we were spending less than we were collecting, and therefore we were in surplus. You have a shock that causes almost 17% destruction and loss of your entire gross domestic product, which means the total of all the goods and services produced in the country. Not only do you have that loss, you don't have to recover. You would not have to build hundreds of homes in Carrickton and Petit Martinique if there wasn't the hurricane. You don't have to rebuild and repair most, if not all, of the schools, the churches, the police station, the magistrate's court. You don't have to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars picking up debris, lifting boats out of the sea, transporting them out. You don't have to pay public servants who were not working. You don't have to build hundreds and hundreds of homes in St. So what it means is, when you have a shock, you have to spend more than you're collecting. Not only that, because of the impact on people, you collect less, because there's less economic activity. You waive the property tax. There was talk about heartlessness. You waive the VAT. You waive the customs duties. So your revenue will fall and your expenditure, your spending will dramatically increase. And that is what has happened. You don't recover from a hurricane in 12 months. As was so eloquently pointed out, here had no Hurricane Ivan house. All the talk about spending and spending, show us the houses you built after Ivan for people. Show them.
Mr. Speaker, the debt to GDP moved from 63.7% in 2022 to 71.9% in 2025. Mr. Speaker, according to the medium-term fiscal report of the government, which is before this Honorable House, there is an overall deficit of negative $279.1 million, which equates to negative 6.9% of GDP for the year 2025. Mr. Speaker, arguably, this is the largest deficit in the history of Grenada, Carriacou, and Peter Martinique.
Witnessing is a performative leadership at its best, prioritizing superficial appearances and housewives and so on, program and so on. Housewives, hey papa. While these coffers of the state are being fleeced, in my view, and I use the word appropriately, so the budget is riddled with self-serving schemes for a select few. So when they say things are happening, yes, man, a lot happening. But for whom? Whom? That I don't want no vehicle. I don't want. Things are happening for the big boys in the CBI. Things are happening for those in the Oil and Gas Committee. Things are happening for those involved with outsourced contract to pop-up companies. Things are indeed happening for those who already pocketed 22 million spent in 2025 on the new hospital that continues to elude all of our trust, Mr. Speaker.
And folks, welcome back to this week's edition of the Bubb Report. Of course, those were some highlights, highlight reel that I put together reflecting the debate on the 2026 estimates of revenue and expenditure as went down in the lower house of parliament. Of course, the debate on the budget moves to the upper house of parliament in the Senate this week. And of course, we look forward to what happens after that. Of course, we are also waiting to see what's going to be happening with respect to the Public Accounts Committee. I do look forward to their meeting as well. I do not know that a meeting was held. I know that the committee was reconstituted, but I am concerned as somebody who has covered Parliament in Grenada, has covered Parliament for many years when I worked as a journalist in Grenada. The Public Accounts Committee was one of those critical arms of Parliament that held government accountable with respect to the finances of the people of the state. But at this point, what we want to do, folks, is to bring in our panel segment of the week. We have here Mr. Christopher Diali, as we also have Mr. Anthony Boson, former Grenada Finance Minister, as well as Mr. Ambrose Phillip, no stranger to the Bubb Report. Of course, these esteemed gentlemen, we always try to mobilize them as much as possible to give us analysis, to give us critical, balanced, and incisive analysis on matters of economy and finance. So, gentlemen, welcome to this week's edition of the Bubb Report.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb. Pleasure to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So, gentlemen, you've heard the conversation I had with Grenada's finance minister earlier in the program. And of course, one of the first questions that I raised with him was, again, the contradiction between the fully financed budget through borrowing and not by any other means of raising revenue. So I want us to start there. Let us start there, big picture on a macroeconomic level. And Mr. Boson, I want you to open bat on that question here.
Thank you.
Borrowing that we've seen here. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Bubb, and it's a pleasure to be on the program once again.
Yes.
Especially in the company of such esteemed gentlemen as my good friend Chris Van Ambrose. I can recall we being on various programs together, and I really appreciate the intellectual content in terms of the contribution to national issues.
Yes.
With regard to the question you asked as to the financing of the budget.
Yes.
Before you go into that, Dr. Bob, I just want clarification on an issue because it really will put the budget into its proper perspective. I heard you made mention a while ago of this new classification in the budget initiatives. And the Minister of Finance, someone I respect, we work together in the Ministry of Finance, he dismissed the concerns raised in certain quarters as nonsense. I don't think it is. I don't think it should be dismissed that, so easily, because really it adds an element of confusion to the document. Because in the minister's budget presentation, he made specific reference to two different categories of expenditures: strategic initiative of $206 million and capital expenditure of $370.4 million. And no explanation was given to the general public as to why this new classification and how it came about. Yeah. So the layman listening would be in a state of, what really is this? Because they are accustomed to two major classifications: current expenditure, capital expenditure.
Yes.
But in the budget, in the estimates of revenue and expenditure itself, the main document, which is a legal document, on page 22, I look at the summary, and no reference is made to initiative, but capital expenditure of $577.2 million. So is it fish or fowl? Either it's capital or it's recurrent. And some people, you might be genuine in your reclassification, but some people might interpret this as being, you want to have the ability to shift expenditure from capital to current at your own discretion. So, I think these are issues that the public will be concerned about and, cannot be that easily dismissed, although there might be genuine reason for so doing. So I think we have to be a little more tolerant with regards to how we respond to queries made on this important issue, because I am a bit concerned myself, because you talk about recurring expenditure with no definite end, and my definition that's recurrent, and we know capital as a specific end. So let's leave it like that. But with regard to the point to raise us to the financing of the budget, whether we should use loan funds or look at other means. Dr. Bob, in simple terms, we can look at the national budget in a similar fashion as we look at your household budget. You're making revenue, you're working, you're generating income, and you have your expenditures. Yeah. You will not. I don't believe any prudent person will want to forgo utilizing the revenue you earn to finance your expenditure and borrow to do such. Because really, when you borrow, you're incurring additional costs. So basically, a budget, the primary objective is to finance your budget to the greatest extent possible by utilizing your local resources. And in the context of this budget, 84% of the financing is from internal sources. Yeah, you borrow a little, but you rely on your internal resource mechanism. And in this context, I think government has to give greater attention to how we can increase revenue generation and at the same time minimize current expenditure to give us what we call a current account surplus. Because it is with this current account surplus, you will finance your capital expenditure, which is the basis for the development of the country. If that surplus is not enough, then you use what you have as counterpart funding to attract borrowing. And in so doing, you will want to borrow on the best terms possible. Yeah? Because as I said, when you borrow, you add to your debt. And adding to your debt makes your whole situation unsustainable. If again you have access to grants, I think that should be utilized. But when it comes now to the financing the deficit, it's a different issue, because it means that you have exhausted all of your internal resources. And by the way, you do not take everything out. If you say you have savings, you don't use everything. You must leave something as a buffer. But in essence, you have exhausted most of your internal resources, and you have to look outside now to see how you can raise money to finance that gap. And in this context, I believe that the government has done what I think is a very good move. Draw down on some of the reserves that they do have at the ECCB and maybe at the commercial bank, and try to access funds on highly concessionary terms to finance the deficit. So, in my humble opinion, I think it is a sustainable approach that has been taken by the government, and I see that they have made every effort to improve on the fiscal situation, in the sense that the primary balance, although it is in deficit, but yet there is an improvement. So you're seeing aspects of improved fiscal management, and I think this is good. So to summarize, let us look internally. Let us look at all the means at our disposal. If you have to borrow, then again, I didn't mention, but you have the local market you could borrow. Most of the institutions, non-bank institutions, they have excess funds. Why not make use of those? There are people who do have large savings. They may want to purchase bonds or treasury bills. Make use of that before we go outside to raise funds to finance the budget. So as I said, maximize internal resource utilization. And if you can't help it, then you go outside to finance.
Then you go outside. Mr. Philip, same question here as part of the opening salvo. Looking at the means by which this budget is financed this year, is that something that concerns you? At least part of it, not all of it, in part, yes.
All right. First of all, good morning to you. Good morning to the other panelists, and good morning to the viewership, listenership, public. First of all, in principle, I do not have a difficulty with a deficit budget. I believe that probably 7 or 8 years ago, Boson, in his capacity as Minister of Finance, did indicate that the problem with debt was one's ability. And if a deficit budget is going to be financed by borrowing, I don't have a difficulty with that, provided that we have the means of servicing that debt. If you look at the debt reports, you would see that, in fact, while there are complaints by the opposition that the debt to GDP ratio is 71.3%, I think, and that may have deteriorated from 63% sometime in the past. The objective reality is that that debt ratio is in fact on the decline. In addition to which, the fiscal management rules, Boson probably knows the act I'm talking about. I think it goes back to 2015. The acts that provide for the management of debt do provide for dispensation to be given to governments in times of difficulty. And in our case, we've had 2 difficulties occurring within the past 5 years. Those difficulties, well, in fact, 3 sets of difficulties. First of all, there was the COVID pandemic. Secondly, there was the burial situation in northern Grenada and Carriacou and Petit Martinique. And thirdly, were the rains that we had last year, that where you had mudslides and flooding, especially in the northern part of the island. So I am not worried about that. In fact, the debt reports have indicated that the debt to GDP ratio should return to about 60% by 2035, and I believe that the trend is indicating that. Overall, however, we can probably talk about the billion that we have had since the advent of this administration. Prior to this administration, we never had a budget that reached into billion figures. The first $1 billion budget was the 2020.
I believe the 2024.
1 second. No. Yeah, the first $1 billion budget was in 2024, 2025.
2024 fiscal year, yes.
Yeah, 2025, you had a 1.9 billion recurrent revenue and a 1.1 total expenditure for 2024-25, and in this presentation for 2026, we see that $1 billion is being maintained. So what this in fact demonstrates to me is the resilience of the Grenadian economy. Resilience in the context of being able to sustain the massive shift in and outlays from 2022 to 2023 and going forward. Somebody is going to argue that these additional outflows have largely been taken care of by the CBI activities. And that in itself cause for concern, because one has to acknowledge the volatile nature nature of these CBI kinds of revenues. I do not know how sustainable that is going to be. One of the other concerns that I've had, and it comes out of one of the recommendations of the FROC committee, to do, and in fact, when you were ending with the minister a while ago, I heard him boasting of $60.1 million it is a fund coming out of CBI, which
that's a contingency fund, I believe.
The contingency fund.
The national. I believe I'm subject to correction. It might not be the contingency.
Yes, it's contingency
fund. The National Transformation Fund, one of those, but yes.
Well, that is only $60 million. That is only $60 million. And that $60 million is premised on 10% of those monies, CBI monies, going into that fund. And I wondered what determined that 10%. Why not 15%? Why not 25%? What is the justification for 10%, particularly when we are entering into a period of greater climate risk and other risk from out there? And not only are we getting a period of more volatile climatic conditions because of global temperatures continuing to rise. In fact, coming out of the Rio conference, the COP conference in Rio, it has been agreed that the aim of trying to limit the temperature, the global increase in temperatures beyond the 2% or whatever had been targeted out of the original Rio Convention, that is now a lost cause. We will be lucky if we are able to keep global temperatures below 3% in the coming period. So what does this tell us? It tells us that we are likely to go into a period of more intensified climatic activity. So I wonder what in fact shaped the determination of 10% of the fund going into that. And given too that we do not know what the future of the fund is going to be, I'm wondering if we should not put aside a greater sum in what appears to be the good times still, all right, as we prepare for worsening times down the road. So those would be my principal summary or overview
Yes.
I have seen in the budget so far. I will give Chris a chance to come in on this.
Yes, let's get to Chris. Chris, do you miss preparing for the budget debate in the Senate? Is that something?
No, I don't miss it at all. That is for certain.
Yes. So let us get to Chris, of course. In the private sector, of course, I suspect, but the Grenadian private sector is one of the major drivers of economic activity. They are second largest employers in the national community. They drive a lot of economic activity in the country from which the government depends on that revenue that it needs to finance the budget. So let us talk about the manner in which the government is going about financing this year's budget. Are you concerned that perhaps there is not a lot of economic activity in the country, in the national community, that now causes the government to look elsewhere for funding the budget as opposed to looking at locally sourced revenue measures, as Mr. Bolson just articulated earlier?
Yeah, Karen, I like the other two colleagues here, not overly concerned about deficit budget once it can be financed. We have had more than one presented, and the hope is that as we move forward, the conditions economically and otherwise will improve, that we don't have a deficit budget going forward. So we have to look forward as well. As Mr. Bolson said, the primary surplus is a major guide to that, because that helps with our capital spend when we put a capital budget in place. The thing with the debt, and looking at the debt report as well, is that I have never been overly concerned with the debt once we could repay the debt. The issue becomes, the minister, I think it's earlier this year, I don't want to say defaulted, but we postponed the payment of interest on a bond payment that was due. And I coupon and the interest. That sends a little concern as to our cash flow and our ability to meet what we have to meet in terms of our obligations, whether it's local debt or whether it's debt to our local business people and what is happening. So that is a concern, and that will raise some hairs as we go forward in the government's ability to meet their obligations financially on a cash flow basis. So I hear the concern, but my major thing is that we can maintain it. I mean, construction is going to be the driving sector for this country in 2026 and probably beyond. And I don't share the minister's view on what is happening in agriculture. I think they're woefully underperforming. Agro-processing has some concern, and we don't seem to have any productive sector has been targeted in any serious way to deal with our construction sector when it tapers off and projects get completed. And that is always, from a macroeconomic point of view, a concern for the economists and how we're going to and where we're going to target. CBI, yes, is an area that you can look and see that, but CBI, as Ambrose pointed out, has its risks. As high net worth people move their funding based on where they think they could get the best conditions for their use of their investments and other things. So CBI does have some challenges. I cited to Mr. Duncan in our program earlier on this week that, to me, the biggest concern with CBI is it continues to be a department of government. And as a result, the ministers and the cabinet can have significant influence over what happens in CBI. We have an NTF, a National Transformation Fund, and to just tell Mr. Philip, the 10% came from an original understanding that we needed to put aside some funds, but NTF and the funds from NTF is expected to help fund projects in the country. So, for example, building a bridge. For example, seeing how we can help with the revamping of schools and what is going to happen there. And to some extent, other projects that the government, ICT projects, may signal that they have an urgent need for. So hence NTF and what is happening there to increase the monies into for issues of emergencies, as the minister says, $60.1 million with ECCB to 10 or say 15% needs to be given careful consideration, because you take more for other things and you lodge what's happening to the other priorities our government may want to identify. So CBI NTF funds is something that will have to be carefully looked at. I think there's a lot more that could be done in CBI for efficiency, but that is another discussion. So that is my initial thoughts on it.
Now, of course, inflation and gentlemen, one of the observations that I made, at least with the opposition's contribution to the debate, was the manner in which the budget was contextualized against the backdrop of the continued global volatility we see. As I articulated to the minister, the faraway wars are now in our backyard, literally and figuratively. It's less than 100 miles from Grenada shores, and this is certainly I believe going to affect and compound in many respects. It may temper the economic growth prospects that we may experience. Of course, if we look at that war that might be coming against the Maduro regime in Venezuela, that can certainly have an impact on growth. That can certainly have an impact on economic stability. That can certainly have an impact on economic certainty. So, Mr. Bosner, I want us to start there and put this in the context of the current inflationary pressures that we see in the country. Because anytime you have these types of global volatility that's now regional and local in many respects, inflation definitely takes a hit there. So let's start there, and the measures that government has put in place to treat with those cost of living pressures, are they going far enough? And how would you recommend the government treat with that potential volatility that is in our backyard at this current time?
Great. Dr. Bubb, reading the IMF Article 4 consultation report, as well as the FROC report.
Yes.
They both made references to external risks that can impact negatively some of the optimistic prospects that the minister highlighted in terms of the macroeconomic variables. And I think that was, as I said it before, one of the shortcomings that the minister did not articulate enough how these external forces could impact the positive growth rate, the declining inflation rate, which you mentioned, as well as the declining unemployment rate. Let us look at inflation. Our inflation is primarily what they call imported, because we import nearly 80% of the things that we produce, that we consume. Yeah. And when we look at developments in the global economy and even regionally, it will be difficult to convince anyone that inflation will trend downward. For one, let us look at the whole issue of tariffs. The United States, one of our main trading partners, has imposed significant tariffs on other countries, and those countries have retaliated. So what you have is a tariff war. The end result of increased tariffication is higher prices. There's no doubt about that, both for those consuming and those for the importers as well as the consumers. So really, if we take that into consideration, I think we ought to, tend to be a bit more moderate with regards to inflation going down as low as 1%. Again, when you say 1% inflation, you have a situation where reality comes face to face with perception or subjectivity. I will not doubt or even question as much the accuracy of the data produced by the statistics department of the Ministry of Finance. I think they are professionals, and they do what they have to do. And there are scientific principles, mathematical formulas that are used in calculating inflation. Yeah. So because someone might go to the supermarket today and find the price of a tin of corned beef has increased from $5 to $10, and they come out and say, "Whoa, inflation, high inflation, I can't live." Okay, fine. You might be expressing your own subjective condition. You go, your basket, you go with $100 and you can't see what you're buying. So we cannot dismiss that kind of perception. But the fact is that you have to take into consideration how you calculate inflation. What is inflation? Inflation is not just the increase in price of one item or two items. It is a general increase in prices that comprise what they call a consumer basket. And that basket of goods and services could be 20, 30, 40 of these items. They are weighted based on the relative importance to the consumer. So food items will have a higher weight. So if there's an increase in a food item, it will show up in the overall index more significantly than, let us say, items that are not consumed frequently. So yes, the inflation rate is trending down, but as I said, we have to, and I think it's a process of educating the people. What exactly, how do you calculate it? They are not wrong, but the fact is that is how we perceive it, because they are using standard mathematical formula. So unless we decide to change that formula to reflect how consumers feel, and that is difficult because that is subjective. I think we have to accept the fact that yes, inflation is trending down, but we have to look at what is taking place globally. And I am not too optimistic that that trend will continue if those negative factors out there continue.
Those external shocks. Go ahead, sir. Finish your train of thought.
Continue.
Yeah.
Yes, there is this issue.
Mr. Philip, yes, please.
Boson is talking about the inflation figures as published by the 6th unit of the Ministry of Finance. And it raises a question in my mind. In fact, I was quite surprised that I saw the report for, I think it was up to the first quarter. I don't think I've seen the second quarter statistical report.
I don't think it was published yet. I'm subject to correction, but I have not seen it yet.
But yes. I was surprised to see that this thing was trending towards 1%. And it makes me wonder whether or not the basket of goods is still relevant. In other words, these things, the inflation data it has a base year, probably at least 7 to 10 years old, probably older. And it may very well be that the nature of the baskets of goods on which inflation is calculated, it may have changed. If you go into the supermarket to buy anything, you can't walk with less than $100 before you take out one of these little, not the cards. Nobody, if you pull a card, you have to walk with the whole country.
That's a $500. Easy.
$500
maybe more.
Let us take. Tell me when last you have seen Tanya anyway by the roadside. We are importing from St. Vincent. The price of fish. Fish is now a thing that you're eating like turkey, like Christmas turkeys. Fish has become a rarity, right? And if you're getting fish for less than 10 anywhere, you accept your fishing for yourself. You go out on a rock and fish for yourself. If you get fish for less than $10 a pound anywhere, you are fortunate. So I cannot understand how it is that our inflation thing is supposed to be so low. Even people who have been involved in the construction industry, given the difficulties which have been experienced at the port over the past 6 or so months, right? Even people involved in construction will tell you that there have been significant price rises there. And the price rises haven't been generated by problems at the port alone. Price rises have been generated by the global uncertainty, right? Rise in freight rates, the increased cost of freight insurance and stuff like that coming out of the war between the Ukraine and Russia. So it may very well be that finance needs to revisit the basket of goods it is looking at. That may very well be the case.
And Chris, of course, I want to bring you back here because, of course, 2 months ago, you were here on the program and you laid out in very stark terms the impact of those external shocks that will inadvertently affect Grenada, the private sector, with respect to what's unfolding in our neighborhood here in the Southern Caribbean against Venezuela, that war of aggression against Venezuela. Do you think the budget sufficiently factors in that specific variable to treat with what the macroeconomic picture is going to look like for next year?
Kellan, I said in a previous interview, I don't envy the minister in the preparation of this budget, because the terms and the conditions and what he has budgeted can change overnight.
Yes.
Based on the geopolitical situation in our backyard. And a lot of the assumptions made and the development of the figures around those assumptions may be blown out of the water instantly. And I want to support and say that I share the view that Ambrose and Tony said, that I didn't accept the 1% that they presented in the budget. Primarily, and I'll just give two examples. If the war is to start with Venezuela and the US, immediately we're going to see an increase in shipping freight rates, because the Caribbean waters are a major shipping route. Once you go to the Panama Canal for goods coming out of the other side of the world, it comes through there and into the Caribbean water. Immediately, you're going to see an increase in freight rates because of the uncertain environment with warships and aircraft and so on. The second thing is oil and gas and energy. Brent is trading out around $68, $80 a barrel. As soon as the war starts, the risk and the future,
that's going to go. The futures are very bleak right now.
$100, $120 a barrel. So you're going to see an immediate increase in energy costs as we go forward to the budget. So I don't understand how they came up with the 1%. I know the basket of goods, as we spoke about, is something that need to be reviewed and so on. But at the end of the day, as Tony and Ambrose indicated, if I go to the supermarket at $100 and 6 months ago I could have gotten 25 items in my basket, now I'm probably getting 10 or 15 because prices are going up all across the board. And it's not just basic food items. I said in a program the last time that there are instruments we could use, and I suggested one. Tony is the bigger economist than me, but I suggested we need to look at our VAT rate of 17% or 15% and probably move it up to 17%, because government needs to maintain a revenue neutral position in terms of its income. And what is going to happen with construction being so buoyant and the cross-border taxes. So VAT here is going to be important. Most of the other OECS islands have moved their VAT rates already up. And when you do that, the government has an opportunity then to exempt further basic food items and other items to help with the inflation and what is happening there across to the ordinary person in the society. So there are, in my view, some fiscal measures and instruments that we could use to look and see how we could help. The things about electricity at 99 kilowatts and above and the 50% VAT, I think that is minuscule in what happens in terms of helping the ordinary person. The petrol tax relief, the petrol tax haven't moved. It's $3.50. Government takes $3.50 to maintain the same $3.50. So there's no relief there. And the free barrel thing was announced so late. I don't know if it's going to have a significant impact in people. And, we have to remember that our people in the US and the diaspora now, inflation for them have gone up. A tray of eggs in the US is $17 and all of that. So their living costs have gone up. Can they afford to send 2 and 3 barrels as before? So I hear the government, but the reality is that a lot of us in the diaspora may not be able to, deal with what is happening on their end. So I believe our inflation is not going to be there at 1%. And once that starts to climb, see more calls by the people to help and so on. I mean, Ambrose, the fish thing is a significant one. You can't. Fish is, even pork and beef. I think pork is around $10 and $15 a pound when you go to in the abattoir. So it's not, I mean, years ago it was $10 and $9 and now is fish was $8 and $9, now it's $10 and $12 and $15 a pound for fish. So I know what you're saying, and that is significant increases.
Mr. Philip, yes, if you can pick up on what Chris just articulated here, especially with reviewing the basket of goods and how we deal with the items on the no VAT list.
Sorry, I missed you there. I missed you.
Yeah, no, I want you to pick up on what Chris just articulated here.
The point I was going to take up from Chris is his recommendation that the rate of VAT be increased.
Yes.
But there is, remember, that still too much of the total government revenue is coming from border taxes, coming from customs duty and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And the non-tax component, well, I shouldn't call it non-tax component, but the non-border tax aspect of the revenue collection remains too low. I am talking about property tax. The Ministry of Finance was supposed to have been preparing. In fact, if I am not mistaken, I believe I received a notice late last year about a revision of the valuation. The valuation of your property. In dealing with the property tax, and I believe I think it's Boson who introduced this property tax business, or he had a hand in it. There are two aspects of property tax. One is the question of the value which is put on property, or the values which are put on people's properties. And secondly, there is the rate itself. So the good thing about the property tax thing is that you can always widen the exemption to take care of the lower income earners and the vulnerable and the people that you are concerned about. But the objective reality is that the rate of tax and the valuation of properties has not changed from ever since they were introduced. That is
not true. Not true, Ambrose. Not true. But I just want to say one thing.
You could recall when last it was changed. However, the point is it has not changed in ages. And
it has not changed,
and probably decades.
Probably in the last 10, 15 years, and Tony could correct me, but the valuations that were done recently have all been put through. So the issue is whether government is going to touch the rate. Now, I must say too that the compliance for land tax and so on, house tax, is the highest in all the tax categories. It's within 90% of what they put out and what they collect. That is one of the highest compliance rates for the taxes. The ones that we falter on is PIT and not even stamp tax, but PIT and some of the others that we have. But land and so tax is one of the highest in terms of compliance because there's very little contention in terms of you arguing what you have to pay based on the assessment that is put out. So that has a high compliance rate.
Maybe one of the reasons for the high compliance is because of the low rates. It's a joke. You compare your property tax with what you are paying for the insurance of your property. And I'm putting it to you. You are paying 25%, right, of your insured value as property tax. I will be extremely surprised.
Agreed, because your insurance is based on commercial value and the commercial value of your property if you have to have a fire sale. Your land and house tax is not based on that. Your land and house tax is based on infrastructure and other things that needs to be put in place in order for your values to move. And if the infrastructure is not there.
Let's agree that area is over in need of attention.
When Trinidad tried that recently, and they included commercial properties, it was rejected so badly that they had to change their mind. Because remember, land and house tax is not only for your personal property. If you own a business and you have property that the business is located on, there's a different calculation and valuation. And that was rejected significantly. So you have to be careful with it and how we look at it as we go forward. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I'll bring back Mr. Boson here to pick up on What, Mr. Boson, someone, is that Dr. Mitchell trying to reach you there, sir? I'm just kidding.
Not yet, not yet.
Yes, Mr. Boson, please pick up on
yes. This issue of tax.
Yes.
To me, I believe what a fundamental mistake that was made by this administration was to impose that that on basic consumer items like sugar and things like that. I thought that, to me, I didn't support that, right? Because I believe there are other areas where taxes could have been levied. Because when you tax things like sugar, let us see, levy on water and electricity, the incidence of that falls primarily, maybe 80%, on the poor class of people. Yeah, and at the same time, we have certain categories of people getting away with murder by not paying their fair share of taxes. So we have two problems. We have two major problems. One, the tax base, in my opinion, is a bit too narrow, and it's focused too heavily on regressive tax and the efficiency of collection. Man, even from my time to now, I don't think we have addressed efficiency of tax collection as we should. Yeah, I think maybe about 30% of what we should collect, we are not collecting because we don't have that. And there are many of, I don't want to go into what is happening in certain areas, but we know what's going on. Another thing I think government should look at, instead of imposing the tax where the burden falls heavily on the poor, food stuff, why not introduce something like a road maintenance tax? And let me tell you why. I've said that on another program. The sector that is making most of the money in Grenada right now is the construction sector. We have contractors with the big machinery, the heavy trucks. You have commercial vehicles. They're the one making the money. They are the one breaking up our roads. But yet, I don't think they are paying their fair share. Right? I believe there should be such a levy that you put the incidence of tax on either the owners or the equipment. So let us say you have a big truck, based on the tonnage, I think you should pay a levy, a higher levy, and use that for road maintenance and ease the burden. Because right now, as we said, this 1% inflation is illusionary. I believe the poor class of people still having a hard time surviving. And we could rebalance the tax by removing this regressive VAT on a lower burden, because VAT falls equally on the poor and the not so poor. Because when you go to the store, they don't ask you, well, what is your income? You pay the VAT. The man with more money pays the same as you, but yet you have a lower income. And those who are making the money, they're not paying their fair share. So I think our tax needs revamping. It's really too regressive. And I think, something government should look at going forward. Maybe with an election coming, they may not want to touch it, but I think that is where we should go.
Now, we do want to get to some, Ambrose, is there anything else you wish to add? I see you
I was wondering if Mr. Boson, in one of his prior hats as Minister of Finance, remember that there was something called the Revenue Enhancement Report, which was effectively shut down by his administration because they were about to. And that report, I seem to recall, had a recommendation for a road toll authority collecting tolls at 3 or 4 points throughout the country, and at an authority being established that will take care of the ongoing maintenance, the bushings, cleaning up drains, and so on, of the particular roads involved. One of those tolls would have gone in Granans close to the post office. Another of those tolls would have gone somewhere on the Granatang Road. Another one would have gone on the west coast, and the one for the south, from the southeast, the southeast, Grandlands to St. David's, was yet to be determined. And that was conveniently buried by Mr. Boson's Ministry of Finance. Just a reminder.
Let us give Mr. Boson the right of response.
Yeah, maybe your memory is sharper than my own. But you're talking about the toll. You know, I'm looking at something slightly different, because when you impose toll, you do not discriminate. Are you telling the man with his private vehicle you have to pay the toll, or the man with his big 10-ton truck?
I respectfully disagree with you, sir, because in this electronic age, right, you can have tools with
QR codes.
The same way you have these Visa debit cards, right? These contacts, you can have tools that people
contactless type.
So if you have a toll by Ghana's post office, for example, you won't have buses paying that toll. The buses will be able to flash their card and go through. And I don't know that poor people are driving BMWs and Mercedes. Poor people.
Well, let's put it that way. I don't think we have reached that level of sophistication as yet. What I was thinking, when you're going to light your vehicle, if you have a 10-ton truck, you pay an
trust we were supposed to be dealing with. So wait a minute. This is a basic stuff. This is basic.
Let's gentlemen, we do want to get to some viewer comments before we look at the midterm report here. But Wendell DeRiggs is saying, if there is an actual war in the Caribbean, we will get to see the real importance of agriculture when shipping lanes become dangerous and air travel risky. And I think, of course, we've really articulated this, earlier with respect to what will happen and what is already happening, really. With respect to our shipping lanes, we are an import-dependent economy. And again, the question that I always ask whenever we have panels like these is, what have we learned from COVID? What have we put in place to treat with those external shocks that we experienced during COVID, right? But let us get on to another comment here. If VAT moves up, will income tax be reduced? That's from Chenny Joseph.
Let me take the first one with the agriculture one, because
yes,
I have a passion about what we're not doing in agriculture. And budgets for the last 4 or 5 years have spent little money on agriculture. This budget again is projecting at 30-point-something million spent in agriculture. And I just want to highlight a couple of things here. The biggest elephant in the room in agriculture is labor and the cost of labor, and the fact that we don't have labor for what's happening in agriculture. So farmers are complaining. Then you have the issue of perennial larceny. That us. And men now have taken it to another level. You go in a melon field, after you steal what you want, you chop up the rest. There is something going on with us when it comes to agriculture. Feeder roads. We're talking about, we had money to put in feeder roads in the last budget and the budget before this, but we're not seeing the feeder roads happening, complaining. And then the marketing board issue. What is going on with that with this government? And it seems to be in delay because they're talking about data and financial information. And then I want to bring up my pet peeve, which is GCNA and GCA, and what is happening there, and the boards, and that this government, the last government, and so on, don't have the will, and as other people would say, the intestinal fortitude to make the change to these boards and get them to be professionally run and get the organizations. Our nutmeg and our cocoa is still one of the most sought after products in the world. Now, cocoa is on a downturn in terms of volume produced because the farmers feel that they're not getting what they're supposed to get. The price is way up in the sky, but we can't produce because of what is going on with these associations and other matters. And I don't even want to talk about the issue of pests and pest control and extension. We have so much happening. In fisheries and agriculture, the fisheries issue that was supposed to happen in January said we couldn't deal with it earlier on in the year because we didn't have the right staffing in agriculture, and we still probably don't. So when you hear the minister in this budget talk about 30.6 million or whatever for agriculture, which is woefully underfunded, the comment that one of your things we raised about if the war starts, what is going to happen with agriculture is going to be a serious question we need to address. We don't seem to be getting what is right. And on our agro-processing, there's a whole issue of why we have had failures. What has all the agro processors that we have, primarily except the small pepper producers and so on, have failed. And it is an issue of raw material and the science and what is happening there. And here we're talking about a shrimp farm that we want to establish in this budget, in the budget in 2026. And I know of a young Grenadian who went to government in the last administration, had the lease done up, was about to sign the government change, and this government have never entertained the young man to sign the lease to occupy the land to do a shrimp farm. And he's coming with all his financing and his expertise. He don't need nothing from government in terms of money. All was a signature and a lease for us to get going. And we're talking about shrimp farm in 2026 when this could have happened since before the election in 2022. So we're not serious about agriculture, Kellan. That's my point, and how we intend to food security. Rose and I just dabble in it, but we know the stresses in agriculture and what farmers face from day to day is not an easy fight. So I don't know if we're going to get anywhere in this budget or budgets to come when we're talking about agriculture.
We have Mr. Bolson, is there anything else you wish to add?
No, I slightly different with Chris with regards to agriculture. I believe after reading the budget document and what I've been done before, I see a number of new initiatives in the agricultural sector designed to expand agricultural output, improve the efficiency, and to make agriculture a more prominent sector in terms of contributing to growth. The problem with agriculture, and we have to face it. One, we have not tackled the issue of predial larceny to the extent that a number of farmers are so frustrated that they just decide not to continue. You spend X amount of money, you produce your crop, when time to reap, somebody else reap it for you. And to me, the legal system is a bit too, it's too lax. It's not stringent enough. It's not stiff enough to deal with those predators. So that to me, that is a discouraging factor. Unless we address it, people will be disenchanted. Agriculture, again, as we know, there's a lot happening, but because agriculture output, the majority doesn't enter into the trade business, it's not reflected. So we'll see agriculture contributing 3-4% of GDP, but in reality, it is more. Again, it all depends on how these things are calculated. Yeah, so we cannot underestimate the role of agriculture by looking at its contribution to GDP. We have to look at its contribution to food security. A number of people in the rural area who cannot find work, they become disenchanted, they decide to go into agriculture. They do their little thing, but they need the encouragement. So I see some hope for that sector. Again, when you look at the number of new breeds of animals that have been brought in to improve on the local stock, that to me is a step in the right direction. Reopening the agro-processing plant, that's a step in the right direction. So that's one of the areas I will give my good friend, Minister of Agriculture, some kudos for. I think he has taken some very bold steps to revitalize agriculture, and he needs all the support and encouragement that's necessary.
Tony, let me remind you of two things. Diamond Chocolate Factory is no more functional, and they're going to Lacalome, which was supposed to be for white chocolate. The situation with nutmeg and nutmeg oil production is zero because of what Nutmeg Association have not done. And we're talking agro-processing and value add. So I just cite those two examples for you for us to understand where and what is the problem that we need to find out with agro-processing. Go ahead, Mr. Philip. Sorry, Kellan.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I love the banter between you three gentlemen. Ambrose, is there anything else you wish to add?
I think if we're looking at the budget presentation overall, I believe that there are a couple of weaknesses when you're looking at the budget statement. Remember, since Bolson days, we have had an implementation rate problem in this country. Our capital program, in spite of all the talk that the government and the minister is talking, beating the chest at presentation time, the implementation rate of all projects is extremely low.
Yes.
Yet this budget does not tell us anything, despite the fact that a Ministry of Implementation led by the Honorable Member for South St. George has been the man put in charge of it. And we haven't got a clue as to what the implementation rate is on anything to do with the government. We get some macroeconomic data, right? They tell us about the GDP, what was 3.7, and they tell us about what the projection was and all the rest of it. But what about the individual performance figures?
So I take it as a
no. In other words, we don't need just the revenue of estimates. We need to know what had been projected and what was actually done. With all that, I don't know how we could talk about making a step forward or going forward. If you look at the budget for the Ministry of Agriculture, to me, the more the Ministry of Agriculture has been given, is the less it has produced. This is in an objective way, right? Marketing Board complaining about not being able to get green bananas, right? We talk about, in fact, the availability. Sweet potatoes less than 3 weeks ago in a supermarket in South was running at $17 a pound. What we call sweet potato.
Imported from St. Vincent.
And I could put it to you now, you go down to any supermarket in town, and if you get potatoes for less than $6.50 a pound, you will be very lucky. So I don't know what is the efficacy of the things that we do, the inputs that we are making. What is the efficacy of it? What is the output for it? It's the same thing we talk. What's one of the major problems that we have in this country? We have a problem where every 3 years people must get salary increases. But there is no, in fact, this is one of the last things that you had the minister a while ago, and he was complaining about penalties for statutory bodies. You can't have penalties for statutory bodies when the same statutory bodies, the vast majority of them, are in fact subsidized by the government. You have to have penalties on the individuals who are responsible for those bodies. That is the objective reality.
Yeah.
Right? You have improved the knowledge in trying the knowledge of the boards of these corporations, bearing in mind that it's the politicians, the administration, that is choosing who are sitting on these boards. And they are the ones who in the beginning chose people who ain't have a clue what's supposed to be involved in governance or understanding a basic financial statement. However, it is the role of the management to ensure that certain things are communicated to the people who are supposed to be ultimately responsible for the governance. And we are going to get nowhere about talking about penalties unless people's individual performance appraisals. In other words, you are the manager of the Airports Authority, you are the manager of the Lotto, right? What was your plan? What was your projection, right? Was it backed by reasonable assumptions and reasonable data and all the rest of it? And if you have failed to reach these kinds of targets that you have set yourself or you have put up for your board to approve, if you have failed to reach them, you must provide cogent reasons as to why you did not reach it. Other than that, it must affect your pay. But we don't do that. People get paid the same amount, whether or not they produce. It's the same way. We're talking about productivity, but we have the trade union movement leading us by the nose every 3 years to just give them pay increases. It is a joke, right? We are not linking output to performance. It's a joke.
Yeah, the whole question of when I read that FROC report on the non-submission of financial reports, I mean, I'm saying to myself, I mean, that is a reflection of a lack of good governance. That is a lack of good governance, quite frankly, in my view.
But Dr. Bob, where does it start? There are responsible ministers for each of these
statutory bodies, correct, including the Minister of Finance.
And the chairman is the minister's appointee.
Yes.
There are times that the reports are prepared and the responsible ministry is not taking it to the parliament. How could you explain a place like one of the statutory bodies not submitting reports to the parliament for years and nobody does anything about it? The minister should be jailed. Maybe that is when we all get serious.
Mr. Boson, you've heard Mr. Phillips' passion here. And as I said, this goes to a governance issue. I'm sure you have had an opportunity to read this Frock report. Is there anything else outside of that recommendation that stands out to you? I even brought up the whole issue of the data collection with the minister, but there were other glaring concerns that the Frock committee raised, with respect to that lack of fiscal resilience that the government likes to talk about.
I want to agree with Bruce with regards to this issue of productivity. For too long, and he rightly said, trade unions and other bodies have been linking wage increase to the cost of living index. Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's something in economics we call the ratchet effect. Whenever inflation goes up, the unions will have a justification for saying we want increase, yeah? But now, tell me something. If as the minister is now projecting a decline in inflation, what will the union say?
Yeah.
And I think
basket of goods is no good.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the reasons. In all of the fiscal rules, the only one that is not suspended is the one that linked the wage bill to the GDP.
13%
There's a Frock limit on that. 13% of GDP.
13% of GDP. That could be a source of conflict. I anticipate serious conflict between union and government in the negotiation coming forward. Because here you're saying we cannot go above that limit. But at the same time, the other indices, like the primary balance, the debt to GDP, you relax that. And why keep the wage bill constant? That will be a source of contention. I don't believe that the government could push this idea of inflation declining. That they won't buy that. Because as I said, when you go to the supermarket, it's a different story. So I want to know, on what basis will the government be able to tell unions, we cannot give you more than what you're asking for? Because in reality, there's nothing to show. To them, price is going up, but at the same time, productivity is not moving. Productivity is going down. So as long as we do not include productivity index in negotiation, we will always have this kind of discrepancies. It should be productivity index plus inflation index determining wage increase.
And Tony, to add to what you're saying there, that the 13% of GDP, I am told, is almost at 13% already because of two things. Primarily, the increases that government gave in the last few years of 12% across 3 years, and of course, the increase in the minimum wage bill. And the other issue is the expansion in people on the permanent payroll, the nurses, the teachers, and so on, that have been added. So that 13% of GDP, I am told, we almost there, if not there already. So absolutely. I agree with your point that going forward, how are going to negotiations with the labor union going to come and ask for another 12% over another 3 years?
And then of course we also have the question of the pension there. At least the pension reform is happening now to make it contributory, and I think that issue really needs really finality and closure there. But gentlemen, big pictures as we close this segment. Big picture, looking at not only the Frock report, which we discussed in some detail, but we did not have a deep dive on it. I did that last week with Ms. Bain there. But also the midterm report, the midterm report and the debt bulletin. How do these reports, gentlemen, stack up against what we see in the estimates of revenue and expenditure? Is this circle squared, or is this squared circle?
Sorry, Boson, I'll just go and then Boson can chime in. I think I just want to say a few things first. That the budget has some good issues if the unemployment figures is correct. of 7.5%, first time we in single. Of course, the attitude to work is way out of whack, and we can't get people to work a full 7.5 hours, whether it's construction, agriculture, anyway.
Yeah.
I believe the fact that there were no new taxes introduced in terms of rate or whatever, that gives private sector some predictability going forward. So we could plan a little better around our finances as it relates to our commitment to tax. And they said the CBI has performed better than expected this year, so far at the end of the third quarter. So we hope that could continue to improve. And the CBI people need to, of course, I know they have went to Africa recently to expand their marketing initiatives, and hopefully that will help. But I think one of the major issues with CBI is it needs to be statutorized. As I said, it cannot be a government department because there's too much influence by the Minister of Finance and his cabinet on what happens in CBI. And that is an area that they need to consider and increase the bond so that local people could get involved. CBI mustn't be restricted to only ICT and tourism projects. We could have CBI in football. We could have CBI sponsoring the national team, get investors to do that. We could have CBI look into other areas of agriculture and how they could get, if we have agriculture as a business and attract people to do it. There are ways we could use the CBI differently to how we have been using it prior. And I believe that is an area for concern. But I end by saying this, that I think the minister did an excellent job in putting together a budget for 2026. It is not easy, and I congratulate him and his team. I do express the concern that as we go forward, because this is a forward-looking document apart from the legal context that it employs for the spending, is that if the environmental conditions in our society change, in our region changes, the whole thing will go out the window, in my view, in a major way. Tourism is going to be affected. Construction is going to be affected in terms of costs and the other areas that are going to be driving this economy, which is construction, tourism, and services. So we need to be careful as to how that risk is going to be managed. I mean, our Prime Minister never gave a decision on the request, and probably no decision sometimes is a good thing if the war was to come. You know, so we should.
Well, maybe Tobago took that hit for us. So in a way, we have to thank Kamala Persad standing White Oak. But I digress here.
So that is it. And Karen, I want to wish you and your team all the best for the Christmas season and the New Year. And we hope all of us are around to celebrate as we go forward.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you again, Chris, for contributing to the program as always. Mr. Boston, sir, over to you.
Yes, quickly. With regards to the deaths,
yes,
I am satisfied that it is manageable. The death stock is manageable, and there is no need for concern. Because when we look at the total debt, $2.7 billion, which is about 68% of our GDP, yeah?
Yeah.
And 82% is really external debt.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, and that was obtained on highly concessionary terms through the IDA, mainly through the IDA, right? 1% or less than 1%. So there is no indication or no red flag that government might default on its debt. That to me is out of the window. My only concern, what I would say it is a concern, is that I would like to see government get our people locally and regionally more involved. Yeah, in terms of, I think they have done that recently, issuing treasury bills and bonds to raise money. The bond, you know, we need more of that.
He didn't say what they're doing with the money from the bond. Eh? That is another issue. The $5 million that they hope to raise, they didn't say what they're doing with it.
Well, I think that is a small sum. But I think, you know, that could be expanded. That trend of getting the local population, because there are people with money. They go to the bank, they get in what 1% or 2%, and if you could, you get 3-4%, it's better. But then again, we need more education. You know, people need to be educated. Because the ordinary man will say, boy, I feel more comfortable with my $2 in the bank. I don't want to take it out and put there. You know, that kind of education is important. So that to me is crucial. You said that's closing remarks?
Yes, Mr. Bosun, closing remarks.
Let me again thank you for inviting me in the program. I thought the discussion was very intellectual, stimulating.
Yes, and educational,
you know. Ambrose and I, we go way back, when he was manager of Port Authority, and I will give him credit. He was rated as one of the best managers Port Authority ever had. Because he was a guy who never really, a disciplinarian. He's a guy who stood for discipline. And I'm a bit disappointed that he's not on one of those statutory boards to bring in some of those discipline.
Right. That's the point.
I was remember before I was minister, I was also chairman of the Port Authority board. So I know Ambrose. And we need people like Ambrose on those bodies, But then again, if we decide to patronize by, politically,
align people and all of that.
I think we'll have a problem. I think we have to go beyond that and use professionals to manage this board, because as you rightly said, and Chris said it, these boards are in a sad state, most of them. The revenue and the potential is great, but what is happening, I think it shows a deficiency in management and discipline. So thank you for having me on the program. And I wish you, Ambrose and Chris, all the best for the holidays, and looking forward to a prosperous 2026.
Absolutely. Mr. Phillips, sir, over to you for some closing comments.
Dr. Bob, I must thank Mr. Boson for his kind remarks, but I am surprised that he limited my achievements only to the Ports Authority. I think of 30-odd statutory bodies, the Ports Authority was the only one that won consistently for 30-odd years, presented annual reports to the Parliament. And for 30-odd years, never made a loss of any significance. For most of that period, almost every year, transferred some little money to the Treasury to help with other expenses.
That's true.
Overall, going forward, I think that the budget statement, the budget presentation, I think needs to be beefed up to do two things. One, to tell us about implementation of what is planned, bearing in mind that while a budget is supposed to tell you what the government intends, tell you about the government policy, where it wants to go and how it wants to get there, I think that the budget should also tell us about what has happened. What was the performance like in the previous period? What were the difficulties experienced in not achieving 100% of what you intended to achieve? And I think that these things are going to set a better basis for us moving forward. I would also like to see that there is decision-making on the part of government that is bipartisan, is across sectors. In other words, we cannot have a situation where because this started something, the other one that may replace it or the one that it has replaced has difficulty with it. We need to build better consensus, or multi-party or multi-sectoral consensus going forward. In other words, the kind of multipartite approach that has worked very well, for example, in Barbados, I think is the kind of things that we need to see here. So I would hate to take Trinidad, for example. One of the security difficulties that Trinidad has had to do with Venezuelans and refugees and all the rest of it has been because the current administration, when they were in opposition, did not support certain security initiatives that had been put forward by the previous administration. Are we now going to have a situation in our own local situation where the question of how do we deal with pension reform, how do we deal with pension issues going forward, are we going to have a cross-party looking at the news on it before we have one side shooting it down because it's not they who had put it forward? We need to have national consensus on these kinds of issues so that there is some kind of unity in implementing them and sustaining them as we go forward. Other than that, let me thank you, Dr. Bubb, for allowing me this opportunity to express a few thoughts. I know that all of them might not have been welcome or accepted or fallen on their fears, but nothing will change. I ain't gonna change.
We don't want any of you gentlemen to change. We appreciate the candor because I think that candor that comes from a place of evidence, that comes from a place of experience and research. With all of you gentlemen combined, you have multiple decades of experience contributing to the national community in Grenada. And what you do really at this point is public service, is public education, and that is part of the mandate here for us on the Bubb Report. So I want to wish all of you gentlemen a very happy holiday season, Yuletide season, and we will see you next year again for other appearances on the Bubb Report. So thank you again, folks.
Thank you.
Viewers and listeners, absolutely. And viewers and listeners, before we end today's program, it would be remiss of me if I did not take this opportunity to congratulate the Right Honorable Keith Mitchell on signaling in the period of signaling his end of political service in Grenada for his contribution to Grenada and to the national community. Of course, Dr. Mitchell left the United States, having given up very lucrative opportunities at our alma mater. Both Dr. Mitchell and I share two alma maters, that is Presentation College and Howard University. We're both former Bison. We're Bison, really. Of course, what we do not share is the same platform. Dr. Mitchell never appeared on the Bubb Report, but that aside, we still want to congratulate Dr. Mitchell and thank him for his service to the national community as the longest serving parliamentarian in Grenadian history, as well as the longest serving Prime Minister of Grenada. And what we want to do in conclusion is to just reflect, go down memory lane a little bit with Dr. Mitchell. But of course, the first time that Dr. Mitchell ran for election and won was in 1984, but he also contested election in the 1970s as well. So this is not the first time that he, in 1984 was not the first time that he contested that seat in St. George Northwest. He was actually involved in frontline politics even before he went off to pursue further education there. And of course, in 1984, the New National Party won 58.61% of the votes. They won 14 seats under the leadership of Herbert Blaise with 24,045 votes. And of course, the Parliamentary Elections Office, their website is down. I was trying to get the data with respect to those actual results from the constituency of St. George Northwest. But again, moving forward, who is going to be replacing Dr. Mitchell as the NNP candidate in St. George Northwest? That is a space we will be watching. And in Dr. Mitchell's absence, will St. George's Northwest become a competitive constituency in the next election? Again, we'll be watching the space to see how all of that will unfold. So Dr. Mitchell, once again, all the very best to you, sir, on signaling your retirement from frontline politics.
So I take it as a special honor, and as I said, an emotional time, because there may not be many more. In fact, it is expected that that will be the last one. Budget debate, assuming from what the birds have said to me, there could be an election next year. It was in December 3rd, just 1984, the people of Northwest St. George's gave me an endorsement to be in this honorable house. In other words, I've celebrated 41 years on Wednesday as a member of this honorable house. Witnessing is a performative leadership at its best, prioritizing superficial appearances and housewives and so on, program and so on. Housewives, yeah, Papa. while these coffers of the state are being flushed, in my view, and I use the word appropriately. So, the budget is riddled with self-serving schemes for select few. So when they say things are happening, yes, man, a lot happening. But for whom? Whom? That I don't want no vehicle. I don't want. Things are happening for the big boys in the CBI. Things are happening for those in the Oil and Gas Committee. Things are happening for those involved with outsourced contract to pop-up companies. Things are indeed happening for those who already pocketed 22 million spent in 2025 on the new hospital that continues to elude all of our trust, Mr. Speaker. In other words, my friend, you had your time. Behave yourself. Conduct yourself as a man. Conduct yourself properly. You said it, so if you said it, take it easy, man. Take it easy. I know it hurts, but you stop. Be careful with your words. And when you travel outside, say you want to promote party, and every place you go, the government loses, or the party loses. Be careful with your mouth. Don't come by me, don't come by the press. Don't come, because I'm afraid. And all of you there, don't let come here. Don't let come. Everybody afraid of him. Oh God, yes. Mr. Speaker, you have to give me a
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity.
And folks, that's all the time we have for you this week. Again, on behalf of, I can't believe the year is almost done already. We only have a few more weeks in 2025. We're going into 2026 really quickly. Certainly 2026 will be an eventful year, but we do want to thank you viewers for your continued participation on our program. We welcome your feedback and suggestions on as to how we can continue to improve the quality of the Bubb Report. It's something that I'm very passionate about. And when I started this program 5 years ago, following the death of one of my mentors, the late, great George Grant, I never imagined what this program would turn into. But here we are today, attempting to distill and make sense of the issues that are affecting the national community in Grenada and in the Caribbean. And our commitment is that we will continue to do that important work in 2026. So on behalf of the producers of the program, I'm your humble host once again, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing you all a pleasant week ahead. And just as a programming note, next week's program will not be live, as I will be away attending an event under the mistletoe hosted by Auntie Rita Gabriel and friends in New York. So I hope to see many of you there at that Under the Mistletoe activity that's happening next Saturday. But we will have a program for you. It will just be pre-recorded, and we will not be able to take your questions live on air. But please also stay tuned for what we will have coming down the pike for you. So again, on behalf of the producers of the program, I'm your humble host, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant week, and we will see you next week again for another installment of the Bubb Report. Take care now. Bye-bye. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching.
Don't go there.
You are a technocrat. I mean, you can speak to whether or not it was appropriate or inappropriate for that to occur. Would you have done that as a permanent secretary?
Politicians get the information from wherever source that they can.
That's going to be the extent of your answer.
Yeah. Don't go there.
There's a lot of noise around the data protection bill that, in my respectful view, is not warranted.
I was one of those making noise, and it's simply because I was concerned about that specific section 33.
Don't go there.
Are you going to be offering yourself up as political?
I see you probably have much more than diplomatic passports. I don't mind that.
Don't go there.
What is the relationship like between you and your leader, Dr. Mitchell, your boss, Dr. Mitchell?
I'm not sure how to explain how to answer this question at this time. I prefer not to answer.
Don't go there.
They said that you approached the bank for the loan before the election and that it only materialized after the election. There are also conflicting reports around the quantity of monies that were received. What is the reality here?
People try to extort the truth and to make all kinds of things about it. I just stay quiet. So if you notice, I was really and truly quiet about the whole matter.
Well, except with not with the New Today newspaper. The New Today newspaper reported on this, so I'm not sure you were quiet on this. Go ahead, Honorable. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just trying to answer your question, right?
Don't go there.
I think we just spoke at length about the regularization framework. So
yes, we did. But let us talk. Let us talk, Prime Minister. Let us talk about the workers who are dismissed.
The Bubb Report. We go there.
Because as you can see, I don't have the backpack on the back. You want to know why? I can bring out my backpack for me. Bring my backpack for me. Let me show them the colors.
loved ones pass on, they deserve to be